Hi there. Well, it's time for another lecture. And so today we're going to be talking about some of the ways that we want to interact with kids. And so first of all, I thought this might be kind of a fun thing to start with. Something that I found online, toddler rules of possession. If I like it, it's mine. If it's in my hand, it's mine. If I can take it from you, it's mine. If I had it a little while ago, it's mine. If it's mine, it must never appear to be yours. If I'm building something, all the pieces are mine. If it looks just like mine, it is mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If you are playing with something and put it down, it becomes mine. If it's broken, it's yours. It kind of ends with the humorous point there, but really, it's just kind of making the point that kind of for us just to remember to see things from a child's point of view, and that a toddler, that is a very normal part of development, is to see things from only their perspective. And of course, our job is to help build that empathy and to help them start to understand that the importance of sharing and that sort of a thing. But I think if you come at it from a point of view of understanding why that feels that way for them, and that it's an absolutely normal way to feel as a toddler, I think that that really helps. So that's not to say that we just give in and just say, well, that's normal, just let them have everything they want. Of course not. But that we don't take sometimes some of the behaviors that are happening as a personal affront, or as that they're doing something that's really defiant and wrong, but more looking at it as, oh, this is a skill that they need to learn. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. So first of all, we know that oftentimes toddlers, one of their number one things that they like to say to the adults around them is no. And sometimes parents and caregivers will get frustrated because they're working with a child who just wants to say no, no, no. And you think about it, well, why do they say no so much? Well, it's probably because they're hearing it a lot. And so we want to really think about other ways that we can talk with children. So first of all, sometimes a no could really be a yes with conditions. So it could be, yes, we can have that after we finish our lunch. Or, yes, you may play with that as soon as your hands are washed. Yes, we can go outside once the blocks are picked up. Yes, you can go on the swing when her turn is finished. See, all of those things could kind of be worded much easier. It's so easy sometimes to word those differently to where they become a no. So it could be, no, you can't go on the swing right now because your friend is on there. But just by saying, yes, you can have a turn on the swing as soon as your friend is done. It just creates a different kind of a feeling. Yes, we can go outside as soon as the blocks are picked up. Sounds much different than, no, you can't go outside until the blocks are picked up. You're saying almost exactly the same thing, but it has a different kind of tone, and one is more likely to set up kind of an escalation of behaviors. As children get older, you may want to try the strategy of, give me a minute to consider that. And that means that you really do think about it. Maybe you can remember a time when you've asked maybe your parents when you were older, or even like a boss or supervisor or something, where you've asked them something and they immediately say no. It kind of is frustrating because you're thinking, gosh, they didn't even think about it. I mean, gosh, and it's just so frustrating. And, really, children feel that same sort of thing. And so to be able to say, let me think about that. Give me a minute to consider that. Can sometimes be a great way to show them that you are thinking about it. The other thing is that sometimes something that you have an instinct to say no to, if you take a moment to think about it, maybe you do think about, oh, yeah, maybe we could do that under these conditions. Or maybe that is an okay thing to do. I've never had kids do that before, but yeah, I guess that wouldn't be a problem. So it's a good idea as children get older and they start to make requests that sometimes it's a great idea to say, give me a moment to think about that. As children get older, we can also say things like, convince me. So when children come up to me and they're working on an art project and they say, can we get the glitter out? My first instinct is to say, no, you may not get the glitter out. But I could certainly say, convince me. And they might say, well, we promise we'll be really careful. And I'll say, well, I'm really glad to hear that. But I'm not convinced yet. And then they might say, and we'll clean up any mess that we make. Say, oh, so you're going to be really careful and you're going to clean up any mess you make. That's sounding tempting, but I'm not quite convinced yet. And then maybe they say something like, oh, and we're going to put a bunch of paper underneath, and so any that falls out, that will catch it, and then we can put it back into the container. And I'll say, oh, wow. And then I'll repeat to them all the things that they told me they would do. And I might say, yeah, I think it sounds like you're ready to use some glitter. Now, it may not turn out perfectly, and then maybe that's something I'll have to think about next time. But I will tell you that most of the time when kids set the expectations like that, they're the ones that did the thinking. Most of the time, they are likely to live up to those expectations. You see, if they would have said, can we play with the glitter? Or can we use the glitter? And if I would have said, well, if you make sure that you're very careful and you'll clean up the mess if you make one, and you use paper to catch any of the extras, that the likelihood of those three things happening are pretty slim. But when they come up with them, and then when I repeat back to them and I say, so these are the things that you promised to do, and then we give it a go, most likely they're going to follow through. If they don't, then afterwards, when I'm helping them fix the problem, or when they're having to stay in to maybe fix the problem or something like that, I might say, wow, I remember you promised me. Doesn't seem like you really followed through with that promise. I'm going to have to think about that. And the next time that they want to do something and they make a plan, I might have to say, I remember when you promised me those things with the glitter. How can I be sure? How can you convince me that we won't have a problem like that this time? And again, the accountability goes right back to them. Again, this is something you use as children get older. One thing that you can do with children, sometimes even pretty young children, is to fantasize with them. Now, it's very important that they understand that you're fantasizing, because we're not there to torture the child. But it can be kind of fun sometimes to kind of go like, yeah, wouldn't it be neat if we could run down the hallway? It'd be so neat if we could have races all the way down to the office. I wish we could. And then you can go on. So like when you're asking children to walk in the hallway, we can certainly fantasize with them that, yeah, it seems like it would be fun to run in the hallway. Or maybe if they're kind of complaining that they only get one cookie at the birthday celebration in the classroom, you can certainly say something like, maybe they even ask, can we have another? And, there's only 2 extra that are left. And so you may say something like, yeah, wouldn't it be fun if we had like a plate full of 100 cookies? How many cookies would you eat? And then one kid might say, I would eat 5. And somebody else would say, I would eat 20. And you could just be like, no way, really? And you just kind of have fun with it. And so you can kind of look for those opportunities. So I used to do this with my son when we'd be at the grocery store checkout line, and all those candy bars were there. And sometimes if he would ask if he could have one, I would say, oh man, let's think about like if I said that you could buy any 10 of them that you wanted to, which ones would you buy? Now he knew by the way I was setting it up that I was fantasizing with him. Again, you want to be careful when you do that you're not setting it up to where some kids take that literally. If they've never really done the fantasizing before and have never done that with an adult, they might think that you're saying, yes, you can pick out 10. So you need to be really, really careful that a child understands that you're fantasizing, but it really can be a fun way to where you're kind of saying, no, we're not going to do that, but let's think about if we could. So you may have some other ideas, and I'm going to share with you a few others as well. And if you do, I hope that you'll share some of those in the discussion board. But first of all, sometimes people say, well, what's the problem? Why don't we just say no? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, one reason is because children hear no a lot, and then that makes them want to say no. The other thing is that sometimes that just kind of escalates a situation. The way that we word things, just like if you're working in customer service, you get trained in how do you give that information to a customer. And so if, let's say, a refund can't be offered because the tags are cut off, there's a way to deliver that information if you're a well-trained customer service person. And so there's just like that with working with children, that there's a way to share that information to where we are creating an environment that can be positive. And so we don't need to be fearful of saying no. It's just trying to set up the environment to where it doesn't feel like it's, sometimes like if you just try to see things from a child's point of view, and if you took a tally mark of every single time adults said no in a child's day, that would be kind of discouraging if you kind of picture your own life that way. That, if you went to the bank and they said no, and you went to the grocery store and they said no, and then you went and called a friend and they said no, and it's just like constantly, if your day was just full of no's, you'd be really discouraged at the end of the day. And I think that our kids can definitely feel that way too. We talked a lot about the environment before, and this is another way to think about how to say no to no, and that is, if children are constantly reaching for something that is meant for adults only, then you might want to think about, well, maybe that should be out of their reach. If I'm constantly having to say, no, that's just for grown-ups, let's say you have the diaper wipes up, where sometimes you use those for cleaning up, and they're at a place to where young toddlers are getting at them quite frequently, and they're wanting just to pull the diaper wipes out because they're kind of intrigued by it, by the whole way that you can pull the wipes out and another one pops up, and that seems kind of fun to them. But then the adults are constantly having to say no, that's not a toy. Well, maybe that just needs to be set up higher. And so sometimes when you find yourself over and over and over again having to say no, then you need to stop and think and say, oh, maybe we need to rearrange things. The other thing is to focus on what they can do instead of what they can't do. So let's say that a child is digging in a houseplant that you don't want them to do that. Instead of saying, no, we don't dig in the houseplant, we could say, oh, let's go outside and dig. Or, let's make a plan of where we can dig this afternoon. Are you going to want to dig in the sandbox, or are you going to want to dig in the garden? Okay, so focusing on what they can do and just being really careful with that. The other thing is that we can really show and don't just tell. So for example, let's say a child is petting a household pet and they're a little bit rough. Sometimes what parents will say is, no, leave that animal alone. But instead we could walk up to the child and we could demonstrate, and we could say, oh, she likes gentle touches. And we might even take the child's hands and show them what a gentle touch feels like. A child who throws a block when a friend asks for one, we can go over and we can show them, instead of saying, no, don't throw the blocks, then instead we could go over and we could say, we're going to be careful and we're going to hand the blocks gently. We're going to be careful with the blocks. And then we demonstrate how to do that. So anytime you can, look for how you can show, don't tell. And of course that has to do with our voice as well. So instead of saying no screaming when a child is screaming, it seems so silly. I was at Walt Disney World once in a bathroom, and I heard a mom next to the stall. Her child was screaming, and she said, stop screaming! And she just yelled at the child. And I just thought, oh, she just doesn't hear herself. And so instead we want to show, we want to say something like, I'll be ready to listen to you when your voice is as quiet, as calm as mine. Or maybe we're going to simplify that a little bit for younger ones. We might say something like, oh, let's use quiet voices. Oh, the loud voices, that hurts people's ears. Okay, so we want to show and not just tell. And then, of course, with young children, sometimes the art of distraction can be quite helpful. So instead of saying no to something, maybe a child is doing something, and then sometimes we can offer up some alternatives, and we can say, "Oh, have you tried this?" So maybe a child that's maybe doing something in the sensory table where you're thinking it's causing too much splashing, instead of saying no splashing, no. Instead, we could say, "Oh, look at what this does." And then we might just go over and we might just show them something else in there that shows them that is not such a messy way to play in the water. And so the art of distraction can be really good. The other thing is, make sure you're thinking before you speak. Does it really need to be a no? So sometimes when we're saying no to kids, sometimes it actually is just fine for them to do that. So, at home with the child, sometimes when we're saying no and they're opening up a drawer that has Tupperware lids in it, sometimes we need to stop and think and say, well, is that okay for them to take out the Tupperware lids? Maybe you're thinking, well, no, it's not, because I don't want them to think that they can be opening up kitchen drawers and there's hazardous things in it. Okay. But, so you can stop and think about it. But sometimes we decide and we'll put like a little sticker, or we'll put something on the drawers that are okay for a child to open. And so we say, this is a drawer that's okay for you to open, and you can play with these in here. And so then we can kind of, to where we're still setting limits. But just to be thinking before we speak, because a lot of times we're just saying no to things and not really thinking it through, and not thinking about like, maybe that's really not a problem. And then, of course, our no needs to mean no when a child is in danger. And in fact, sometimes it's not a good idea to use the word no, because a child might be hearing no a lot at home and other places. And again, as I mentioned to you, sometimes that can kind of bring up to where they just want to show their powerfulness, their independence. And so when you say no, sometimes they want to be thinking inside, yes, I am going to do that. But children do tend to respond to stop, danger, hot, in a word, and it's the way you say it. And so we definitely do want to be saying no and saying other words that let a child know when there is some danger right there. And then we can, help kids understand that too. And so we can even practice sometimes with some words. And then when a child does stop, when you say something like that, you say, "Oh, thank you so much. What a smart decision you made. You are really working on staying safe. I was so worried when you reached for that, because that is a really hot thing. Oh, that would have made such a big owie. And you stopped. When I said stop, you moved your hand away and you stopped right away. That was such a smart decision. I'm sorry that I left that out. I'm going to move that because, that could just create a really big owie. That could be a really big hurt." And so we want to make sure that we really thank children when they follow that. Now, something that you want to also think about that sometimes blows people's mind is avoiding saying yes as well. And people go, what? What are you talking about? Well, Hayam Gino, he talked about using freedom phrases. And freedom phrases help children make their own choices and use their own powers. So when a child says something like, I'm thinking about, like, in my classroom, sometimes kids will say something like, "Can we use markers on this project?" And I'm thinking, like, in my head, yeah, that's not a problem. So it's really tempting for me to go, yes, you can. Well, now it was my decision. And really, they didn't do any of the thinking with that. I was doing the thinking. I was thinking like, oh, yeah, I don't see to where that would be a problem. But instead, what I could do, if they say, "Hey, could we use markers with this?" I might reply instead, "If you want to." Or I might reply, "You decide about that." And what's really funny is that sometimes when I do that, I'll see kids contemplate for a moment, and then they'll say, "Yeah, I don't think I'm going to because," and then they'll have a reason why not. And really, I had no problem with them doing it, but I think it's kind of cool when they learn how to say no to themselves. And also when they learn to say yes to themselves. Because even when you say, "You decide about that," you will notice that they take a moment to think. They don't instantly go to it. Whereas if they said, "Can we use markers on this?" and I said, "Yes," they would just instantly get the markers. But if I say, it's really up to you. You pay attention if you do a strategy like this, and you will notice kids take a moment to think, because you're saying you do the thinking. And it really is just amazing. So taking these freedom phrases that are right here on the screen and putting those somewhere to kind of remind you of ways that you can say yes are really pretty powerful. I really encourage you to give that a try. Now, we're getting towards the end here, and I want us to think today about Burke's Dirty Dozen. And Kay Burke is an author and an educator, and she wrote out what she calls her Dirty Dozen. And so I want you to think in your head about what those might be. Here's a hint. Two of them are sarcasm and favoritism. She says teachers should avoid using sarcasm with kids, and obviously they shouldn't have favorites and show favoritism. And so think in your head for a minute about what would be 12 other teacher behaviors to avoid. Well, let me show them to you. And as I show them to you, I'm going to share with you one of my most regrettable teacher moments in my teaching career. So this is what Kay Burke identifies as her Dirty Dozen. Sarcasm, negative tone of voice, negative body language, inconsistency, favoritism, put-downs, outbursts, public reprimands, unfairness, apathy, inflexibility, and lack of humor. Well, let me share with you a story that I'm not proud of, but it's a story from early on in my teaching career. And I was in a classroom with 4th and 5th graders, and one of the students, we were using some math tools during a math lesson. And when I say math tools, I mean like little Unifix cubes, little plastic cubes. And one of the cubes was thrown across the classroom, and I saw who threw it, and it was a student named Donald. And I started with sarcasm. And I said, "Oh, it looks like someone wants to stay in a recess to help clean up the floor." Now, not a good idea to do that, because what that did was that just raised the escalation there. Rather than trying to de-escalate the situation, I was actually raising it by doing that. And not only did I use sarcasm, but I used public reprimand as well. So then, actually, let me finish the whole story, and then I'll go through and I'll analyze it. So my first reaction was, I said, "Oh, it looks like someone wants to clean up the floor during recess time." Now, right after that, I was continued to walk around, and another plastic cube went flying through the air, and this time it even went pretty close to my head, like it went whizzing right over my shoulder. And you know, for me, that was just a turning point for me. It like a button just was pushed. It was my, red hot button there, and I just snapped. And I grabbed a whole tub full of those little Unifix cubes, and I went right over to him, right in his face, and I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry. I forgot to mention that, so he threw them, and then I said, and as he threw it, sorry, boy, my mind, as he threw it, he said, "I don't care," because I had just got done saying that whoever was throwing them would need to stay into the classroom. So it was the throwing and his reaction of, "I don't care," that's what made me snap. So I went and I grabbed the container of Unifix cubes, and I walked right over into his face, and I just dumped them right in front of him. And then I said, "Do you care now?" And I was just right in his face, and I just said it loud, and as soon as I said it, I mean, the rest of the class was just so quiet. Everybody was just kind of like, and then he just instant tears coming down his face, but also a look of, it was a look of, you aren't going to break me kind of a thing. So soon after that, the kids went out to recess, and he was on the floor picking them up, and I went over and I helped him, and I realized, I had made a big mistake, and I apologized to him. He apologized to me. We both made a plan for what we would do next time. It was actually, that right there actually was pretty positive. But my big regret was, number one, how I dealt with it. And then number two, my other big regret is that when the rest of the kids came in, I pretended like it never happened. And you know what? They saw it. And I should have apologize to them. And also, I should have apologized to Donnie in front of them and let them know that Donnie and I solved this problem and that I was really sorry for the way that I dealt with it. But I was so embarrassed, and I just wanted to pretend like it never happened. But of course it did happen, and it was a teaching moment that I let slip by. And so when I ran across this list years later, I just was like, oh, no wonder I feel so bad about that situation, because I use sarcasm. I use a negative tone of voice. I used a negative body language. I was like right there in his face. I was inconsistent. Obviously, this isn't the way that I would normally deal with something like that, so that's inconsistent. I don't know if I necessarily use favoritism, but I definitely use put downs. I had an outburst for sure. It was a very public reprimand, and it was definitely unfair. And I don't know if it was so much apathy, but it definitely showed inflexibility, and for sure there was a lack of humor. So I hit 10 of the 12 in one moment. I mean, it was seriously like 30 seconds that happened, and I hit 10 out of the 12. So I say that as a way to say, you know, we all have those moments, whether you're a parent or whether you're a child care provider or an educator. You know, we have those moments, and then the important thing is that we learn from them and that we work hard to try to avoid these behaviors. And you know, it's also being aware of, oh, what are my hot buttons? And so knowing what those are, so that next time you'll be more prepared to how to deal with those. So it was a big teaching point for me. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to show just a quick video, and then I want to go back and I want to talk through that video. So let's see here. Here we go. All right, so just watch this video. We're just going to watch about 1 minute of it, and then I'm going to talk with you about it.
That's where you don't have to go to sleep, but remember you have to stay on your mat. It's time to rest and relax. Playing quiet is not a choice. Joshua, turn back around the other way and go lay on your bed. Look at Meg. Wyatt is trying to rest also. You don't want to mess with him. Wyatt is trying to rest Joshua. He doesn't want to play. Alright, Joshua. Do we need to help you get on your bed? Tell Miss Leslie what you want. I'm not going to come back over there, Joshua, if you're kicking Miss Debbie. If you would like me to come back over there, you need to ask.
Okay. So let's go back and let's go back to the beginning of this, and I'm going to stop it and kind of talk through. So the first thing that really comes to my brain is, first of all, it just makes me wonder about the routines that they have set up for nap time and such. I mean, obviously some of those routines are working for a lot of the kids because we see a lot of the kids laying down. But it may not be working for this child. It almost seems like the way that they're interacting with him, it makes me think about that this is not the first time that this has happened. So I would first of all be thinking about preventatively, what are some things that we could do to help this boy calm down and to be ready for nap, or to at least be ready for rest time. So that would be the first thing that I'd be thinking about. So let's watch just a little bit of this.
Respond in ways that don't help the child learn more positive behaviors.
That's where you don't have to go to sleep, but remember you have to stay on your mat.
Okay, so first of all, when she says you don't have to go to sleep, but you have to stay on your mat. This is where I was talking about the way that we talk with kids. The words that we say can be so important. So, you know, saying you have to stay on your mat, that just almost, in a sense, almost creates kind of a power struggle there. You know, it could be very different if we say, well, during rest time, we stay on our mat, but it's up to you what you do on your mat. And then I might even throw a choice in there. Did you want to read books or did you want to have some puppets? And so I might even, have some choices there. And there may be different choices. Maybe you're thinking that's too distracting to others around him or something. But there could be, even, did you want to grab a Snuggly, or did you want to listen to a story? Maybe there's a listening center thing with headphones to where he could even listen to kind of a calm story or something. So, but instead of saying you have to stay on your mat, instead just saying, during rest time, we stay on our mats, but it's up to you, what you want to do on your mat. And so we can really just think about that wording.
It's time to rest and relax. Playing quiet is not a choice.
Okay, I love how she said it's time to rest and relax, but notice what her body language is doing. And I love that they shot it from this perspective. All he's really seeing is her legs, okay? Getting down at his level, which she does end up doing later. But it would have been very different if she would have done that from the get-go. And also if she would have done it in a way to where it feels more like she's really trying to engage with him. It would have been very different. Saying something like, it's not a choice to play with him, that's basically a no. And so instead of focusing on what's not a choice, again, it's kind of like going back to those things like, what are some choices he does have on his mat?
Joshua, turn back around the other way and go lay on your bed. Look at me. Wyatt is trying to rest also. You don't want to mess with him.
Okay, so she's saying you don't want to mess with him. Well, actually, in fact, maybe he does. I think it's fine for her to say he's trying to rest. But also, I think some things to build into these interactions would be some empathy. And so to say things like, you're feeling like you still want to play. You want to play with some friends, or you want to play in the tube, or you're feeling like you still want some toys to play with. And so then we could then maybe even say some ways that maybe we can meet those needs. You're feeling like you want someone to play with. Did you want me to go over to your mat with you? Or did you want Teacher Sarah to do that? Okay. So then we can kind of say, well, we'll go over and we'll quietly play with you. Okay. Or it may be something like, you're feeling like you want some toys to play with. Let's go look at the nap time toys and you can choose a nap time toy to take to the mat. So we're acknowledging like what it is he's wanting and trying to find a way to make it work if that's possible.
Wyatt is trying to rest, Joshua. He doesn't want to play. Alright, Joshua. Do we need to help you get on your bed?
Do we need to help you get on your bed? That's not really a real question. That's really a rhetorical question. It's kind of like a choice in a sense, but it's not really a choice. It's what Alfie Kohn would talk about, a pseudo-choice. Sometimes we use language like that with kids. It's not really a real choice. And so we need to be careful when we're using wording like that. So if you're really feeling like you need to go that direction, then I would just say something like, it looks like maybe you need some help going to bed. Did you want me to carry you or did you want me to hold your hand? Okay. And so again, trying to build a choice into that. I do like how when she put her hand up there, though, she didn't say no. She, so she's trying hard to use some positive language there, but I think she just needs to work on that a little bit better.
Tell Miss Leslie what you want. I'm not going to come back.
Okay. Again, that person said, tell Miss Leslie what you want, but I want you to pay attention to like how she's sitting and how she said that. It just really doesn't feel very genuine. The other thing I want you to think about is the environment. I'm looking at that mat for him to sleep on, and that just doesn't look very inviting at all. I don't see a little cuddly there. It'd be great for him to have some board books that he could flip through that maybe he got to help choose. Maybe some little fiddle toys that he could have in his hand that he could just kind of fiddle and play with. Something. But that just kind of, when you're not feeling tired for a toddler, that does not look like a very engaging place to be. And so it really isn't surprising me that he's reacting in that way. When he kicked her, she didn't really react except just to move his legs instead of saying, oh, that hurt. Oh. Oh, Joshua, I'm sure you didn't mean to hurt me, but oh, that hurt my legs. We want to be gentle with each other. Okay, but that reaction, it just seems more to where, again, it's really just disengaging, and she's still very separated from him. The other thing is, I want you to listen to that tone of voice from the teacher that's far away, and she says, I'm not going to come over there unless you, well, first of all, the way she's talking to him, you really think he wants her over there? I'm not really sure. But instead of, it could be something like, I'll be ready to come over when, and so, letting him know when you will be there. And so let's see, what else did I want to say here? I'm looking through my notes to see if there was anything else here. I think that's pretty much it, and I'm sure that you guys have some things you may want to add there as well. Let's finish watching it.
Over there, Joshua, you're kicking Miss Debbie. If you would like me to come back over there, you need to ask.
Okay. Again, he's doing some kicking, and so it may even be to where, what are some things that he can kick? Oh, we don't want to kick Miss Debbie. That hurts her legs. Let's get an exercise ball that you can kick. Let's get, so something let's get an exercise mat against the wall that you can kick. And let's take your shoes off so it's not too loud and it won't bother your friends. Okay? So we can acknowledge that he wants to do that. Maybe we have a small little trampoline that he can go do a little bit of jumping on before he lays down. Sometimes some of these ideas won't work because they're going to be distracting to others. But definitely, I just want you to think about how, even though they weren't yelling at him, and we didn't necessarily see Burke's Dirty Dozen there, but there definitely were some ways to where interacting with him could have been different. And I think the number one way to really think about that whole incident is really the preventative kind of thing. So I'll be curious to hear what you guys are thinking about from that situation. So, so what you're going to be asked to do in today's discussion board, or in the discussion board for this week from this lecture, is you're going to be thinking about things that maybe where you would typically say no to a child, and you're going to think about another way that you could word that. So you might take some ideas that we went through with our PowerPoint. You might think about the video that we watched and some things that I talked about with that. You might think about Burke's Dirty Dozen, and you might even just be thinking through your own experience as well. But try to make at least some connection to the lecture, and then you can certainly add some of your own ideas as well. So I want you to come up with an example of something that you would that a child care provider or an educator might say no to a child about, and then think about how that could be worded differently. So I'll see you online this week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.